What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. And we've had over 12 hours to really process and think about the things that came out in Media Day that, like I said, it's the unofficial start to the season. It's my favorite season. It's fall. Fall has started. Basketball's right around the corner. It's good times. We're going to break down a little bit further and go into detail over how this team is going to create their identity. What are some of the things we should look for in the team early in the season, where some of the sticking points may be. A little bit of all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
All right, Bulls fans. So I had some more time to kind of break down, think about everything that came out in Media Day. And, the one thing that I would say for me that is kind of the overarching theme throughout the Media Day, throughout every interview, outside of, being asked about Lonzo Ball, Patrick Williams, and things like that, is both the individual goals and things that these players and teams, this team wants to hit, but also the collective one. The understanding that this team, while played very well together at points last season, that they all kind of carry the weight of where the season ended up, right? How the back end of that season went. And like I said, you have the individual goals. You have the Zach LaVine, who wants to continue adding to his game to live up to the contract that he signs. You have DeMar DeRozan, who just wants to continue just being the player that he is, to prove people wrong, the doubters wrong, the fact that he sees all of it, the questions around his game, and if he can continue to add and things like that, the questions around Alex Caruso, his health, that type of thing. Patrick Williams, is he finally going to take that leap? Is he going to be more aggressive? Nikola Vucevic, the doubt around the season that he had. Can he go back to being the more efficient player that he was? Is he going to rely on that three-point shot? Is he going to operate a little bit more down low from the inside out, as many people want to see from him? Head coach Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan talking about the identity that this team needs to build. The fact that, they skated by on some things last season. They did good in some areas. They did bad in others. How they stagnated at one point, wants to get away from that. Talking about the ball movement. So what we're going to talk about today is how this team is going to build that identity. What is this? What could be the identity of this team? And so while, overarching, you hear from a lot of teams, a lot of players, you have to be good on the offense and defensive side of the ball. Billy Donovan drilling that point home as well when he talked about it. He talked a lot about offense, talked about things like facilitating through Andre Drummond, but overarching, you want to see this team play better defense, more consistent defense, hit the threes at a higher rate or shoot more threes, which came from Zach LaVine. What is going to be the identity of this team? When you look at this team, betting on continuity, when so many other teams around the East went out and did the things that on paper are they're more tangible to see improvement when you go out and make acquisitions. That's the tangible thing, right? When a team goes out and adds a DeJounte Murray, when a team goes out and trades for a Donovan Mitchell, when you do those type of things, those are the tangible improvements. You can see a clear path on how that team is going to improve. The path that's not as clear is when you do something like the Chicago Bulls did, and that is bet on continuity, because it's harder to see what type of leaps and developments players are going to make season over season. And especially when you have a player that was a key cog in what you do in Lonzo Ball being out to start the season as well. You start off with questions like that. Those type of things, it's natural. While I don't agree with some of the people that say the Bulls are going to be a playing team, they're going to be lucky to be this, they're going to be lucky to be that, I can understand. Understanding and agreeing are two different things, very much so. And I think sometimes we'll be better, especially some of you guys who go on fire in the comments, would understand that, or if you could grasp the fact that you can understand something and not agree with it. I completely understand some of the doubt around this team. Some of it I don't understand, because some of it is crazy fans, but nonetheless, it is what it is there. But when you look at the fact of how many other teams went out and made those tangible moves, and the Chicago Bulls added 3 players. They added Andre Drummond, Goran Dragic, and Dalen Terry. Everything else on this roster is pretty much the same. So when you talk about that, when you look at that, it's kind of easy to understand, all right, these other teams clearly improved. If we're going to improve, it's not as, until we get on the court, right? Until we see those improvements come out on the court, it's not as visible. It's not as tangible. So looking at how the Chicago Bulls team and how they're going to build that identity that Billy Donovan talked about, there's a couple of key things that we have to see in it. Defense has to be one. Everybody has to be locked into the role defensively. Zach LaVine, as I pointed out, was a much better defender with Lonzo Ball on the court. But guess what? We know we're not going to have Lonzo Ball on the court. Each one of these team members, or members of the team, I guess I should say, has to own their defensive assignments. And we have to see that team as locked in on defense as we do anything else. And that's why I'm starting this list off with defense. The defensive identity that this team builds or does not build is going to be a big part on what and how far this team can accomplish this season. The defensive intensity, and that is why, like, I'm a big proponent of Ayo or Caruso starting, not as much as Goran Dragic. But even without that, what brand of defense, what the physicality that this team plays defensively, at the very least, you look at the defenders that we have on this team, the players that you know are going to be intense on both sides of the ball, but key in defensively. Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, Andre Drummond, Alex Caruso for sure, right? We have those players that are key defensive cogs in this. Hopefully we add Lonzo Ball back to that. Zach LaVine, as I've been calling out, needs to take a defensive step first. But in building the Chicago Bulls identity, the brand of defense they play, how efficient they are on the defensive side of the ball is going to be, we know this team can score, right? And we'll talk about the offense, don't get me wrong. We know this team can score. That's not necessarily the biggest problem with this team. And defense, for the most part, for the large part of the season, wasn't either. We did fall off a cliff with all the injuries, and especially when Lonzo Ball went down and things like that. But guess what? And to quote somebody, Lonzo Ball is not walking through that door, at least not anytime soon. So for us, we have to establish a defensive identity early in the season, whatever form that takes. You have to be keyed in defensively. We have to try to get it out in transition. We have to try to get those steals, play in the passing lanes, own our own assignments, play good team defense overall. Yes, we don't have the rim protection that a lot of us wanted to add this season, and guess what? It's not going to all of a sudden come. We can dream, talk about trades all day, moves all day, but guess what? At the end of the day, AK and Eversley don't seem like they're poised to make any moves right now. So the way that this team establishes that defensive identity early on in the season, now, of course, it can change, it can grow, it can even get some refinement over the course of the season, but they're going to have to lock in defensively very early in this season to establish that type of identity. Secondly, the rotation. The way that the rotation shakes out for the Chicago Bulls, what players that you can play together, the growth of certain players as well, that's going to play a huge part in the identity of the Chicago Bulls. When you look at this team, right, the rotation isn't as clear, right? We have some thin spots, especially at that backup three, power forward. You know, I know a lot of Bulls fans are over the small ball, but guess what? It's here until it's not here. And right now it's here. Javonte Green is still going to be playing backup four. Get that in your head. It's going to happen. Is he going to play some more minutes at the three? Yes. Do I think that he's going to be more effective in doing so? Absolutely. But guess what? At the end of the day, that's what we have right now on this team. How those rotations shakes out. Now, the difference of the matter is, and I think some Bulls fans are overlooking this, is that now Javonte Green, when he is out there as a backup four rather than the starting four, a lot of times he's going to have Andre Drummond back there with him. And that's a very different than starting Javonte Green with Nikola Vucevic, who isn't the best defender. So when Javonte did get beat on those bigger matchups, he didn't really have a second line of defense with Nikola Vucevic like he's going to now have with Andre Drummond being out there with him. That is going to make some I will wait to say big changes, right? But that can pay off some big dividends for the Chicago Bulls. Just the difference in that lineup, not having him out there with Tristan Thompson as well, and having Andre Drummond in there who's coming in poised, ready to go. The rotations are going to be a big part of how this Chicago Bulls team does and how those players play in those minutes, of course. It's going to be fluid, especially to start the season. You may see a game where it's Goran Dragic out there for 16 to 18 minutes and Kobe White only played about 8. You can see the flip-flop of that, the reverse of that. How this team settles into their rotations, how these players come together in those rotations. One of the things that helped the Chicago Bulls early in the season and over the course of the season is the chemistry. These guys love each other. You can tell they enjoy playing with each other. They enjoy one another, hanging out as people and as players, and they respect each other. That chemistry, the rotation of those chemistries is going to play a big part in the Chicago Bulls team, nailing in their identity as a team. And of course, the starting lineup, right? It's going to be a vastly different starting lineup and different energy and different vibe, whether you start Ayo, whether you start Caruso, whether you start Goran Dragic, as some people think may happen. how the rotation shakes out is going to play a big part, because then you're looking at a different bench unit as well, and different skill sets that can come out of that bench unit. When you look at the Chicago Bulls team, whatever the rotation ends up being is, of course, and that goes without saying, is going to be a huge part in what this identity of this team ends up being. The next one is the offense. Now, we know, I've said it before, this team is not going to have trouble scoring, right? We averaged 111, 110 points per game last season. So with that being said, though, is that we even if the Bulls, in the way that they played offense, average that amount of points, imagine what it's going to be like if we get players actually playing without the ball. The motion on offense, the changes that this team makes in offense to empower more people, to not just stand around watching Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan go to work, to not just be a spectator. As a lot of people, our best off-the-ball player last season was Alex Caruso on both offense and defense, but he was at times the only one moving without the ball. There were times where Io passed up shots that we know he needed to take. Now, there were games where he absolutely different. That's why I said that at times we know Patrick Williams passes up shots. If you get these players more comfortable and use them in better positions, use them in better situations that are key to their skill set, you can unlock a whole new level to the Chicago Bulls offense that we did not see last season. And we can do that partly by just having more and more motion on the offensive side of the ball, using Nikola Vucevic more as a down low presence, and using his three-point shot, his ability to shoot three, as a complement to the other parts of his game. But a key part in what the Chicago Bulls and their identity is going to be is, how do you get Nikola Vucevic back and operating primarily on that block? When you look at a lot of the areas that DeMar DeRozan does operate in, and then if you overlap that shot chart with how Nikola Vucevic usually gets his points when he does down low, there's a lot of overlap there. So Billy Donovan is going to have to work into this system a way to make sure that Vooch can still feast down low and not become a perimeter player by not taking, but still having DeMar DeRozan operate in the areas that he's the most happy and comfortable with in that mid-range game. The identity of the Chicago Bulls team, as we look to continue to build that, as that's something that Billy Donovan and Arturas Karnisovas pointed out in the media day yesterday, is going to be one of the biggest questions for the Chicago Bulls team early in the season, in preseason, throughout training camp, whatever it is. The identity that they build is going to be huge, but for the first, let me not say for the first time, but for one of the few times in recent Chicago Bulls history, we have a team that's coming into training camp, that's coming into the season with expectations. Arturas said it yesterday in media day, that the expectation is to be better than last season. To be better. Now, some people have said that means, and taken that as, that means that you have to go into the second round. And I would say that I agree with that. This team cannot be that team, especially, listen, the thing that confuses me about so many people is that some of the same, right? Let me not say everybody, because everything isn't 100%. But some of the same people that said last season, when the Bulls were facing COVID and injuries, that said, well, injuries aren't a reason, are now saying, well, the Bulls can't do much without Lonzo Ball being on the court. You can't have both. This team, at least they're coming into this season with the ability to know that Lonzo Ball is just not going to be ready. And if I was anybody, I would be planning for Lonzo Ball, planning as if Lonzo Ball is not going to be there for the season. I don't expect that. I do expect Lonzo Ball to be there by December. That's just my personal expectations. But I'm saying you have to prepare as if Lonzo Ball isn't walking through that door to save you. The development of key players on this team, when you look at Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, at this point, the expectations are there because of their play being there, because of the offseason that Patrick Williams has had. When you hear every single Bulls player, GM, and coach that was interviewed yesterday in media day was asked a question about Patrick Williams. This team believes in Patrick Williams. Patrick Williams believes in Patrick Williams. He has to be more aggressive. He has to understand, but this coaching staff also has to put him in better positions to utilize his ball handling skills. As we build this, as we have these expectations, as we have a team now that, like I said, despite the haters that say this Bulls team is going to be a first round exit, this Bulls team is going to be lucky to be playing, I don't give a damn about none of that. I don't give a damn about none of that. Because the story is yet to be written for the Chicago Bulls team, but they have to go out and prove every single game, every single practice. They have to put in that work. And luckily, we have a team that is putting it, you get that feeling that they are putting in that work to improve both individually and collectively. That collective chip on their shoulders that I talked about so often last season, of how this team came into the season with so much doubt surrounding them, doubt like everything, that's still there now, right? Even after what they did last season, it's still there. But now they have to refine it. Last season, you laid the groundwork. This season has to be a refinement upon that groundwork, and for both the coaching staff and the players. Ayo Dosunmu isn't the second round rookie that gets to sneak up on people anymore. It's not that. People now know what Ayo Dosunmu offers to the Chicago Bulls team. He has to add more to his game as well. That is going to play. If any of the young players, and in that I mean Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Patrick Williams, Dalen Terry to a degree, if they show up more than what they did last season, right? And that's not to slight when Dalen Terry wasn't here. But if they have added things to this game, if they have refined their game over the course of this season, imagine what type of wrinkles and additions and layers that can add to the Chicago Bulls team. Media Day has me excited. I'm still on a high for Media Day. I won't lie to you guys. But looking at this team, looking at the expectations that we have now on this team, looking at the way that the players have talked about this team, the way that the players have talked about what they want to do and what they want to achieve and how good they know this team can be. That statement of we know how good we are from almost every player worded differently, you have to live up to that now. You have to live up to that because the doubt is facing the Chicago Bulls team. There are teams that made those on the paper adjustments that are additions that are easily to look at as, hey, this team has improved in these ways. The Chicago Bulls don't have the luxury of that. All they have is them. They have to improve. We have to see improvements from the coaching staff as well. It's not just the players. You can't allow this team has to get to having more off the ball play, coming off screens, moving without the ball, getting open. There can't be any more standing around watching DeMar go to work. That can't be. And even looking at DeMar DeRozan, as great as DeMar DeRozan was last season, the 28 points per game, his best statistical season of his career, yes, I think DeMar can give it again. He thinks he can give it again. That's the biggest part, regardless of what me, or anybody else thinks. But at the end of the day, these players have to support this team better. The bench, Goran Dragic, Andre Drummond, what do they really add to this team outside of what it just looks like they add to the paper? How does everything come together for the Chicago Bulls team? We have expectations on this team. The players have expectations. The GM has expectations. The coach has expectations. We have to live up to it. And in building this identity of the Chicago Bulls team, it can't just be Zach and DeMar in isolation anymore. It can't just be the team that plays better defense because Lonzo Ball's out there. All those caveats that we throw out there have to go away today, tomorrow, going forward in the season. They have to. So as we continue to build this identity, as we see this identity build from this team, as we see players hopefully get pushed outside of their comfort zone so they can grow, the sky's the limit right now for the Chicago Bulls team. And as we head towards our first preseason game, only 7 days, less than 7 days, well, no, exactly 7 days away, 7 days away from seeing the Chicago Bulls play basketball. I'm excited. I know you guys are excited. That's it for today's show. Let me know what you guys think about everything down below. Don't be surprised if you get another episode today as well. Sorry this turned into like a passionate rant at the end of it, but that's why I feel and that's what I think about this team. I want to hear from you guys down below how you feel and think about this Chicago Bulls team, good, bad, indifferent, or otherwise. Sound off down below. Make sure you're following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text and or voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. You are the best part of Chicago Bulls Central. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. And like I like to end every episode, go Bulls. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.